Welcome back to Small Changes, Big Shifts. I'm Bailey Souza, here with my co-host, Dr. Michelle Robin, and today we are joined by Dr. DeAngela Burns-Wallace, who is the president and CEO of the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, where she leads efforts to expand access to opportunity, economic mobility, and entrepreneurship. Her distinguished career spans higher education, public service, and philanthropy, including serving as the Kansas Secretary of Administration and Chief Information Technology Officer, which was the first African American to hold either cabinet position in the state's history. Before joining the Kauffman Foundation, Dr. Burns-Wallace spent more than 15 years in higher education leadership at Stanford University, the University of Missouri, and the University of Kansas. She is a Kansas City native, award-winning leader, educator, author, and most importantly, devoted mother. She remains deeply committed to helping individuals and communities thrive, and we are honored to have her on this show. So welcome to Small Changes, Big Shifts, Dr. D.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're excited to dive into the conversation. And I think really just to kick us off and for our listeners, really who is Dr. DeAngela? Beyond all the titles and the accomplishments we just shared, who are you and the experience that have shaped you into who you are today?
I think when you think about how do you define yourself, we always start with the titles. We start with the bio. This is where I've worked, and this is the things that I've done and the positions that I've held. But for me, when I really think about who I am, it goes back to my family. It goes back to where I came from, which is Kansas City. I grew up in Kansas City, right in the heart of Kansas City, right near Swope Park. I grew up in a community where family, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, we spent holidays together. We spent weekends together. We went to the same church. We grew up and spent time in community, with community, but also supporting community. And I think that really has been a driver in the work that I've done, the way that I've tried to show up in the work that I do, and just most importantly, how I move through spaces and places. The connections is where I start, but that all stems from how I grew up, my family, and just that feeling that as you move through places and spaces, you really have to know people, know their journey, know the things that motivate them, the things that they love, but also the challenges. And that shapes so much of, whether it was higher ed or education or now philanthropy, just how I try to show up.
I love the word show up. We have a philosophy about the LTRs, lifetime relationships. I feel like you're doing that and mention that with your family and your community and just getting to spend some time in your orbit the last few years. I can see that and I feel that in your intentionality about the way you're building not only community outside of the Ewing Kauffman, what you're doing inside. And so I want to tell you, it's not unnoticed of somebody who, I'm not a native to Kansas City. I've been here, gosh, hard to believe about, not quite 40 years, but 38 years.
We claim you as a native now.
I receive that. I so resonate with who you are and how you're showing up. When you say the word show up, our LTR is about 410 and show up, be a go-giver, which you are with what you're doing. I want to talk about the Parade of Hearts, by the way. Celebrate. And you do a great job celebrating over at the Kauffman Foundation. I watch what you're doing with uncommon leaders. And just so thank you for doing that. And the other one is kind of do one-on-one. So I feel like that we're having a one-on-one here with a group of people observing it. So that's awesome. So the show up was the right word to say to me. And so when you think about this community you were around, was there a specific inspiration that has led you to your heart of service?
I would say it's probably my grandmother. I call it my granny. She was a core member in my life, but in community. She was that person that really took care of people, whether it was neighbors, maybe it was family, or it was the church, right? And no matter what, you knew that you could go to her if someone needed help with their, rent, if someone needed help with their car payment, or if somebody needed a meal. It was how she just, using that same word, showed up. But she really instilled in my parents, in our, family, that you were there for other people. One of the things that was really important is that she fundamentally believed that we all have something to give. that maybe you don't have a lot, but you have a little bit more than the next person. So if you have a little bit more, then you have something to give. And that when you're asked that you're supposed to give, you think back on it when you're coming up, I don't know that you really know or understand all the lessons, that your family is teaching you. But when you observe someone who always took care of people, when you observe when people were struggling and that the very first phone call that they made was to, your granny, you think of her as your own, but she was communities. She was kind of a lifeline to so many. That's how, for me, I truly wanted to make sure that I moved through, not just professionally, but also personally. I have a small friend circle that I love celebrating, that I love lifting up. And so whether that's a birthday or, a promotion or heck, a bad week, right? Our job is to make sure that we're okay, to ask each other how we're doing and to stop and listen and make sure we see and hear the answer. Because if you're not okay, like that's our job is to lift each other up. And so, I have to say, as simple as it may sound, my granny, my grandmother was my core, was, a role model and a mentor before I knew what those words really were. But I pride myself on trying to be that connector, that support, that person that lifts. And whether that is a member of my team that I'm trying to pour into or encourage or create an opportunity for, or a member of my family, or as I'm connecting in community, love identifying young up and coming leaders and seeing what we can do to support them, encourage them, elevate the work that they do as well.
How do you show up for yourself? What tools would you give to either your younger self, to your son, to the young women you mentor? How do you show up for yourself?
I do it better now than I used to, right? Over the years, I have really tried to focus on creating space and time for me. And that means I have to schedule it. That means whether that is time to think and reflect and be strategic, time to step away, and whether that is actually like traveling and going on vacation, or just spending a few days where I get to kind of refresh. And that refreshing can be hanging out with friends. It can be a good spa day, which I love. And sometimes it can be actually helping someone out on something that they need. But whatever refreshes my energy. But what I have learned is that I do have to schedule it. Like I have to be intentional about what that looks like. For me, I know my balance is hard. My meetings are long, my schedule is full, the requests that I get are never ending. So if I don't first schedule time for me, I can't show up as my best self. So scheduling time and then honoring myself enough not to schedule over that time that I schedule, right? I was telling someone the other day as we were working through something that rest is actually a part of leadership. And it's something that we don't talk about, right? But that rest, without it, you can't show up as your best self. You can say, well, I'm going to keep pushing because, my team needs this or my family needs this. But if you're not your best self, you're not giving them your best self. So rest is something, and whatever that form that takes, that is essential. And I don't always get it right, but I try to be real intentional about it.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing is the intention. It's always
Mhm.
about when can I make sure that I'm also filling my cup up? And we talk a lot about
Right.
this on the show of how we've almost romanticized the grind in today's times. And
Yep.
while the moment for it, you want to pour from your overflow. You don't want to be pouring from an empty cup. And so it starts with pouring into
Mhm.
yourself so you can better serve whatever that looks like for you, whether it's your family, whether it's your community. And one of the things I took a lot of notes, but one of the things that really stuck out to me when I was just listening to you talk about, where you've been and where you're going was this back and forth between the personal and professional impact. And really that line is non-existent. I think the way that
Mhm.
you express yourself and the way that I hope our listeners are picking up on it is the impact bleeds over in both areas. And the more that we're intentional about that and not just, I'm Bailey from 9 to 5 and I'm checking these boxes and I'm making the impact here, but I'm also Bailey at home and Bailey, the daughter and the wife and the mother who's also making that impact. And you have to rest in order to do that. You have to allow yourself that time in that space. And it was just beautiful to hear how you maybe didn't even realize, but as you were describing, I mean, it was one and the same, personal and professional. It's just who you are. And I think one thing that's also interesting to me is you came back to the community you were raised in. You're doing a lot of work in your hometown community. And so share a little bit more about what pulled you into your role at Ewing Kauffman Foundation and also what drew you back to Kansas City and why are you passionate about this community?
So, opportunity is everything. For me, I have spent my entire career in public service. And so from federal government to higher education to state government, and I have been very fortunate that opportunities have aligned and I've been able to leverage my experiences across my career. I stepped away from my role at the state, as was mentioned in my bio, and needed a pause. I truly took a pause for the first time in my life. I had been working since I was 14 years old and had never not worked. But when I stepped away from the state, I said, I need to take a pause. I need to reset. And during that time is actually when the Kauffman Foundation position came open. One of the things that really drew me to the position was, you think about the work, being in philanthropy, you really hope and believe that you're able to be transformative, to leverage resources, to change lives, change communities, change trajectories. That's what you work towards. That's what you strive for. But for me, it was not just about taking a role in philanthropy, but it was to be able to serve a community that helped make me, a community that poured so much into me growing up and along my journey. My family, my friends, organizations that are core to this community were a part of my upbringing, were a part of my preparation to go off to school, and throughout the years has supported me in various different ways, whether I was in Kansas City or not. So to have a unique opportunity to really make full circle, to give back, but also it was important for me because the perspective of coming from that community and then to be able to support it is really important. I do believe representation matters. I do believe that perspectives and having varying and diverse perspectives is key and critical in truly transformational work. So I believe coming from that community, but then coupled with my experience internationally, federally, state, throughout higher education, when you bring all of that to bear on the work that we are trying to do in terms of creating access and opportunity for everyone in community to give people the power of economic mobility in their own hands, there wasn't a better job. I don't know. It was almost like it was, perfect. And that doesn't happen often in your career. And when it does, you need to stop and listen because you're put in that place for a reason and for that season.
So much to unpack there. At Small Changes, Big Shifts, part of our mission is to make generational change. And we believe everybody has the right to well-being. And we also believe that well-being is fairly simple. We insist on making it complicated. And what I'm thinking about is I'm related to the Kauffman by a string. One of my mentors is Barnett Hellsberg. I've been involved in the Hellsberg mentoring program for about 23 years. Speaking of 3 years, happy anniversary. I am curious, how do you think, if we were sitting here talking to you in Kauffman today, what do you think he would tell you?
Oh, if we were talking to Mr. K, I think first and foremost, he would still believe that Kansas City is the heart of this country, that it is a place worth investing in, that it's our job to ensure that more people in our community have access to the resources and opportunities that they need, right? I hope that he would see that the foundation over the last few decades has made great strides and impact in doing some of that work. But from what I have learned of reading and listening to kind of his voices and his reflection, he would also challenge us in this moment to do more, to go bigger, to dig deeper, and to have greater impact. And I think that's right. I think that is what we're supposed to do. I think that philanthropy, particularly coming out of other sectors where I have done, work in and around communities, philanthropy has a few less rules, right? We can define a lot of things differently. We can leverage and partner in different ways. We can be innovative outside the box, in his own words, uncommon. And so I think in this moment, he would be pushing us. He would be asking us to think deeper, go further, make sure that we're having real impact in the communities that we serve.
Mm. Thinking about philanthropy, what does that word actually mean? I didn't look it
Yeah.
up in the dictionary. So what does the word philanthropy mean? And what are ways people could show up in philanthropy? Because you may think it's only money.
There is some work out there that talks about the difference between like charity and philanthropy, right? And one of the things about truly being a steward of in philanthropy of the resources do typically start with the dollars, right? But it's not just that. It is the knowledge a lot of times. It's the access to information, people, or opportunities. For me, one of the things I've loved about learning more about this field is the expansiveness of it. So sometimes it's dollars that are leveraging directly into an organization. Sometimes it's connecting an organization to technical resources that allow them to go further or deeper in the work. Sometimes it's connecting organizations and people simply to each other because we have a different perspective and can see across a sector of work that is happening and how they can be a catalyst on others. Other times it's about amplification. One thing about philanthropy, and particularly larger foundations like our foundation, we are positioned in a way that people listen, that people trust the validity of who we work with, of the research that we do, of the conversations that we are a part of. So how do you use the seat of philanthropy to amplify, to elevate work that is happening in community? You mentioned the Kauffman Uncommon Leader. Part of that work is not just to say, let's give somebody an award. It is to truly amplify amazing work that is happening in community right now so that we're seeing more and understanding more and able to connect deeper. Because one of the things that Mr. K believed was that at its core, that we can do anything if we're working together. All the dollars in the world are not going to make that difference if that work isn't happening. So for me, philanthropy has a space and a place where dollars might be the catalyst, dollars might even be the draw. But at the end of the day, the power of that work, of that sector, philanthropy, nonprofit, public sector, corporate partners coming together, a lot of times we can be the glue. So
Speaking of collaboration, you've been a big promoter of Parade of Hearts, and I love Jen Nussbeck, and I love the thought of the Heartland from the Parade of Hearts. Tell me what made you get behind that and what you're seeing as a community, especially now that we just hosted the World Cup.
So, Parade of Hearts, when I stepped into my role in 2023, I don't know why, but you know how you drive around the city and you see the hearts, right? And they would pop up. And I said, I wonder how you get a heart, And it was the simplest question because when I first saw the hearts, I thought, wow, like that is such a cool Kansas City thing, right? The heartland, how we talk about the heart. When I stepped into the role and we started doing the work around our refreshed strategic plan, that kept resonating and echoing through the work, like this part, right? Being a model for, the rest of the country around what we can do, the possibilities, the impact that we can have. So as I looked around and we thought about things that we wanted to invest in, things that we wanted to, be present in, Parade of Hearts came through really clearly as something that simply brought people together. It got people talking. It brought people from all walks of life to both create the hearts, but find the hearts, to locate the hearts, to think about what it meant in a single collective way with one symbol that we all got and understood, particularly in this region, right? That heart in our region means something to us. So at first, we hopped in there and said, of course, we sponsor many things in community. It's one of the things, again, that is part of the work that we can do is to be a sponsor. Sometimes we're a table host. Sometimes we will sponsor a conference. But in this instance, we said we'll be a sponsor, Parade of Hearts. What I didn't know, but what I would learn and what became so amazing through this journey is that we would meet local business owners, these entrepreneurs, creative artists, teachers, musicians, just so many different people who come together to actually create the hearts. Many of the people who created the hearts were full-time artists. They were people who were artistic, that had a passion and a vision, and they created a heart. One of the things in our first round of the hearts was that when we went to go select the hearts, I was so excited. We were very intentional. We looked for hearts that echoed, the work that we were doing. So entrepreneurship, community. We thought about where we placed the hearts, right? And to say, do we have an opportunity to place the hearts maybe in a different place that maybe hearts aren't always placed? You see a couple of them around town and there's more than one. So when we picked our hearts, the heart that we hosted at Kauffman the first year that we were part of Parade of Hearts in 2024 was focused on women entrepreneurs. It was interactive and you were able to scan and it took you to a list of local women entrepreneurs. Well, we were so excited and amazed by the artist. We actually pulled her in as we were finishing up our campaign when we were doing our strategic refresh. And she became one of our vendors and helped to build some of the collateral that we incorporated into our first round of our strategic refresh. And I was like, yeah, like this is the work that should be happening. We put one of our hearts over at Mohives, our urban beehive that is over on Wabash. And a lot of people wouldn't necessarily drive down Wabash, but that urban bee farm is having tremendous impact on our ecosystem. It's one of those places that when we got the heart placed there, Dr. Marion Pearson, who is the creator and helped to bring that urban beehive to Kansas City, she was just overjoyed. She said, well, I always wanted a heart, and this one looks like a bee. But her joy was not just about the heart. It was the idea of so many people who would learn just a little bit more about the impact ecologically that something like an urban bee hive in that farm has on our community. Luckily, we got to keep both our heart and one other heart in 2024. And the one that we kept, we gave to Mohive because it belonged there. That power, right? What started as a sponsorship that was just, yeah, let's help sponsor. It's a good cause. It's having an impact, really turned into, now how can we leverage this? How does this look differently? How can we amplify and how can we elevate? And that has only continued to grow. 2026 has been amazing. I think we doubled the number of hearts that we sponsored this year and have placed them all over Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, and in the surrounding areas. But again, intentionality around the artists, intentionality around the messages, and intentionality around the locations. So if you follow the Kauffman Foundation on LinkedIn or Instagram, we are highlighting our hearts. So check us out, try to go find them. They're all over the city.
I'm not a Kansas City native. I moved here after college, but my husband's from here. And we actually, Dr. Robin and I got to serve as the mayor and the deputy mayor at the reveal of the hearts this year. And so my daughter, nonprofit babies, they get dragged along to everything. But when we were setting up our booth, they were there. And now she looks for the hearts everywhere. We drive through town and she yells and she spots them out and she knows where to look for them. And so it's created not only for the city and the community, but I also come across hundreds of families saying the same stories of their kids look for the hearts. They take pictures by the hearts. They create a fun, almost gamify it. And it's a beautiful thing that Parade of Hearts is created for our city to not only highlight something for Kansas Cityans to do, but also the great work that's happening in our community. And we have to give extra love to Dr. Marion Pearson. We love her as well and the work that she's doing. And so that's a beautiful that a heart landed there. We've got a heart at your Wellness Connection as well. And so we love being able to see the joy spread throughout our city. And I think that's a perfect way because we always wrap up our show with heart to heart hugs. So, what a perfect segue as we wrap up today's episode, learning about the beautiful work that Dr. DeAngela is doing with the Kauffman Foundation. And we are actually going to have her join us again next week so we can dive in more into the work that she's doing and talk about her new book that is out. So, join us again next week as we dive into that conversation and continue this good energy. And we learn more about the beautiful opportunities we have in Kansas City, as well as the beautiful path that Dr. DeAngela has created. So until then, we're sending you all big heart to heart hugs.